So currently the entire Earth is being invaded by vampires. But what is Wolverine, one of the best hunters in the Marvel Universe, doing during all of this? Well, my name is AJ here at the Hero Informer, and let's find out. We see Logan at some bar in the middle of California, with even the skies outside being darkened due to Blade's manipulation. As you see, the vampires now have free range across the entire globe to attack and turn anybody they can. But here we see Logan is just chilling, even watching the news as the Avengers try to fight off this threat. But as he is here alone, he says on the bright side, at least the beer is free, as he goes to pour himself another mug. But before he is able to, we see there is another intrusion, some armed forces, who seem to be looking specifically for Logan himself. And with this, Logan then puts on his cowl and pops his claws, getting ready to do what he does best, as he then lunges for the group. And let me tell you, this battle gets brutal, as he lunges and slices the neck of the first person he reaches, saying he reacts on instinct, taking out the nearest threat. But just then his instincts take a back seat, especially when he sees how young they are. But this slight hesitation does nothing but put Wolverine in a bad spot, as one of the soldiers shoot him point blank in the chest. Because yeah, even though Wolverine has a pretty good healing factor and can heal from almost all kinds of wounds, he still feels the pain and it still hurts him, as he then clutches himself and falls to his knees. And with this, Logan stops showing sympathy, as the armed forces then walk forward on Logan's downed body, getting within reach for him to stab one through the head, and continue the fight. And this is less of a fight and more of a massacre, as there is nothing so far that they can even do to slow Wolverine down, as he pretty quickly dismantles and cuts them into pieces, each individual soldier. Because even though they are young, he says deep down, he knows better, that these boys are gone, consumed by the uncontrollable bloodlust of being a vampire now. Killing them is mercy, as he cleanly swipes a guy's head off, clean off of his shoulders. But as he does this, another one launches him through the window, crashing him outside of the bar. And here's where things get really interesting. As you see, these guys came prepared, because yeah, in the Marvel Universe, Wolverine isn't some hidden figure. His healing factor and what he can do with his claws are pretty well known. So conventional weapons such as bullets or guns aren't really gonna do anything, so they brought some bigger weapons. As you see Wolverine get hit in the back by some kind of beam, specifically an electromagnetic beam, which this almost military grade squad is using to attack him, which in his own words he calls it a heat ray, as it literally starts cooking him alive from the inside out, with Wolverine even going on to describe in detail it, saying it's supposed to be non-lethal, but tell that to the adamantium lining his bones. Every inch of his body is scorching, searing skin and metal together, molten hot blades inside of a scalding flesh forge. And the pain is so great that he can't move, can't breathe, but at the same time he can't die. So he's in a continuous cycle of being burned, pained, but then healed again, and it continues. And he would have been trapped like this if it wasn't for some outside help completely destroying the machine and freeing him. And as this new help arrives, we even see them take out the rest of the armed soldiers, using arrows of all weapons. And who is this? Who has come to the rescue of Wolverine? Well, we see it's a lady named Louise. And this isn't just some random person, no, Wolverine and her have a history, which we will get into very shortly. But for now, Logan recovers from the battle and they head back into the bar and start to talk. And as they talk, they catch each other up with what's been going on in their lives. As you see, Louise was trained and was part of an order known as the Night Guard, which is basically an elite vampire hunter house sworn to seek out and destroy any vampires. But things happen and she crossed paths with Wolverine, and after some battles, she and the rest of her order were either killed or turned into vampires themselves. So it seems Logan is surrounded by vampires, even down to his allies. But you see, she isn't like the rest. No, you see, when she first got turned, Logan took her to another realm, populated by vampires who learned long ago how to control their bloodlust and become basically normal. But because of all of that, she's basically had an existential crisis, as because the human she once was technically dead, as she is a vampire now, something entirely new. And so her life purpose before of hunting and exterminating vampires really isn't applicable in her now state, so she really isn't sure what to do, and that's why she answered Logan's call for help. And so with that, Logan himself starts to recap what has been going on with this whole Bloodhunt event and vampires invading and trying to take over the entire world. At least from his perspective, as you see Logan in his own words was killing time and brain cells in some casino just outside of Vegas. With him even thinking to himself, it felt good to have some time off for once. But obviously he should have known better to know that this wouldn't last. As in the midst of his little casino run, absolute chaos erupts everywhere as the vampire herds start to come and feed on people in the casino. And if that wasn't weird enough, it seems like a bunch of them knew Logan personally, at least his name, and came there specifically for him, with Logan going on to say, "I didn't know how he knew me, and frankly, I didn't care," as he pops his claws and gets right to doing what he does best, killing and taking out these vampires like a well-oiled machine, slicing and dicing every enemy he sees without failure. And as he is done mopping the floor with them, he steps outside to not only see the chaos is widespread, but the sun is no longer there and the skies are darkened. And so with that, Logan realizes he is really out of the loop and has no idea what is going on. So he fights his way more out and heads to his motorcycle, riding off and calling down to some people he knows at the CIA for some help and knowledge of what even is going on. In which his agent buddy gives him a little rundown, basically the vampires and Blade leading them took control of every Dark Force user on the planet and using their abilities to darken the sky, which makes it an eternal feeding ground for vampires as they decided to come out, hunting and turning everybody that they could. But this brings us back to current time, as Logan came to this bar to wait for Louise. As being a former vampire hunter herself, he could tap into her vampire expertise. But she then goes on to make an observation, saying, so both the soldiers here and the casino guard seem to be seeking you out specifically, and they knew who you were. Do you even have any idea why? But of course Logan doesn't and was relying on the CIA agent to try and get some intel. And just at that moment he gets a call back, and his little agent buddy going on to say that the National Guard unit that attacked you here has a bunch of other active vehicles that he is tracking, and they are part of a convoy that is moving west real fast. So Logan decides to go after them, bringing the Lady Night Guard along with him, to try to hunt these new agents and get some intel about why are they hunting and attacking him. And so as they get on their bikes and head off, Logan makes a notice of how the roads are so empty, and how he has never seen this before. But their little ride doesn't last long, as they're driving up, it seems there was agents waiting for them, as one fires a rocket blowing them off of their vehicles. But of course, Wolverine is able to recover first, thanks to his healing factor and all. He gets a drop on some of the agents, and as he is attacking, he thinks to himself, wait a minute, I know these guys. They are mercenaries, professional killers, which means somebody has hired them. So first it started with the casino guards, then the National Guard, and now these mercenaries. Someone is doing this on purpose. A sequence of events progressively getting harder, maybe to even test him in some way. But so as Wolverine and Night Guard continue to sweep house and take out all of these agents, suddenly he gets another call. But no, not from his friend at the CIA, it is someone named Maverick, who again he has a history with, and it's pretty complicated, but the TLDR is he is an elite mercenary who has worked with Wolverine back on the Team X days. And as it turns out, obviously this guy is up to no good, as he is the one who has sent mercenaries to attack Wolverine. But that's not all, as he goes on to explain he has sent everybody, from the night guards at the casino to the military personnel at the bar. And why? Well, he says it's an early little proof of concept for his new partners, or aka a test. Originally, Wolverine is thinking this is some kind of hit job, but no. Maverick goes on to explain, this isn't about money or killing you, it's about bringing Wolverine over to his side. He then goes on to continue saying, humans and mutants had their chance, and they both struck out swinging. But now, the vampires are stepping up to the plate, and something tells me they're going to knock it out of the park. But of course Logan doesn't like the baseball terms, as he then simplifies it, saying, I'm preparing for the impending power vacuum, when all that is left are vampires fighting for the crown. But still, Wolverine says that is stupid and makes no sense. Maverick goes on to say, maybe not now, but it will. I am building an alliance, an army, and no, not just with humans. But I'm missing one thing. The one thing that'll tilt all the odds in my favor. Our very own weapon of mass destruction. You, Wolverine. So either you can play for the winning side, or you can keep fighting. But I gotta warn you, pal, it only gets harder from here. As he smirks and we see his vampire fangs. Meaning Maverick is now playing on the side of the vampires, and is trying to turn Wolverine to get him to his side, either willingly or forcefully. As he then finishes up saying, if you can't beat him, join him. As we see Wolverine and his new duo, Night Guard, surrounded by more and new agents and previous ones getting up, ready to attack and restrain them once more. We see them together fighting hordes of undead soldiers, trying to capture and detain them by an organization ran by one of Logan's old school buddies, Maverick, who plans on capturing Wolverine himself and turning him to the vampire cause against his will. But Logan goes to monologue and recap recent events, going on to say, the whole world went pitch black a couple days ago. Vampires got control of the Dark Force, and I have had bloodsuckers on my tail ever since. Most of them were trained soldiers before they got turned, and they have been coming after me like they knew me. And up until now, I didn't know why or how. But it turns out an elite mercenary named Maverick sent them after me. And the worst part is, Maverick is an old soldier pal. And as Wolverine is thinking all about this, he is fighting and decimating every soldier he comes upon. Almost like it's on instinct. Because at this point, Wolverine having up to hundreds of years of experience, some normal vampires with guns aren't too big of a threat to him. Well, not yet at least. Logan then goes on to talk about his new teammate that is helping him fight this vampire battle. Her name is Louise, and she goes by Night Guard now. And funnily enough, she is a vampire herself who's been trained by a vampire hunter guild. And now she is doing the one thing she knows how to do best, hunt vampires along with Logan doing what he knows to do best as well, battling and murdering his foes. But even though they are fighting and wrecking house, there is just too many soldiers, and eventually the duo is cornered behind a car. But all hope isn't lost yet, as Logan seems to have some friends in some high places, as he makes a quick call to a friend who someone in the Air Force owes him a favor. And because of this, as the soldiers look up, they see multiple drone strikes and missiles coming straight their way, blowing up all of the vampire soldiers and instantly ending this battle. And with that, his little CIA buddy gives him some more information on where Maverick, the guy who was sending all of these vampire forces after Logan, and his new duo Night Guard, he gives the duo information about where Maverick is hiding, somewhere deep underwater in a cave. As he also tells Logan about the cause of this whole entire vampire invasion in the first place, which is Blade's meddling and doing, which even surprises Logan, as while Blade and Wolverine are not super close, he is still known as a hero and a figure in the superhero community. And so with that, Wolverine and his duo head off to find a way to confront Maverick. And speaking of which, we cut over to see him and his new duo, which is a woman named Alyssa. And while technically she's not too important overall, just know that she is a vampire herself and has worked closely with Dracula in the past and pretty much wants vampire supremacy. So of course, with Maverick now being a vampire, she and him teamed up to try and establish a new footing in this new vampire invasion and possibly a future where there are only vampires. And so right now their efforts are trying to turn Wolverine to their side, either willingly or forcing him to become a vampire and join them, because who can say no to an almost indestructible being of mass destruction that is Wolverine, and that is before being turned into a vampire, which would make him even more powerful and with more abilities. As this vampire queen, Alyssa goes on to further explain, she says when Blade and his minions are depleted, after finishing off the so-called superheroes standing in their way, it will be their turn to rise out of the shadows and strike. As she then turns to Maverick, specifically telling him, if you were to be my king, then you will make good on your plan to have your hairy little mutant friend be our pawn and mercilessly carving out the blood-drenched pathways to our throne, as it is pretty evident that she has Maverick under her thumb. But moving back over to the hero's side, we see them at some sort of port, as they need to cross this body of water to get to where Maverick and his secret hideout is. But unfortunately on this side, we see a bunch of vampires, Maverick's special force specifically, seemingly loading up big cargo ships full of humans. Why? Well, because Maverick and his entire operation are now, well, vampires. They need a steady flow of blood, fresh blood, and so they take human hostages, innocent civilians. And while yeah, Wolverine and Night Guard could probably sneak by and get to their destination without intervening, they aren't just gonna sit by and watch all these humans get slaughtered, well, because they are superheroes after all. But as Logan gears up, ready to put his foot down and save all these people, suddenly his duo Night Guard has some reservations, and isn't completely in the moment. As she goes on to say, it's just the news about Blade being the cause of all this has shaken me up a bit. You see, the Daywalker has been such an inspiration for me during the years, and if he can be corrupted, what hope do I have? But just then Wolverine cuts her off right there, telling her to stop. As he goes on to say, he has been in the trenches scrapping and fighting next to Blade enough times to know that whatever is going on now isn't passing the smell test. And the same could be said for Maverick, because power was never really his thing. Maverick's thing has always been about making as much money as he can. So Wolverine goes on to say that something isn't right here and in New York with Blade. And what do you know, Wolverine instincts would be right, as if you are following the main Bloodhunt storylines, you would know something very strange is going on with Blade, and if you don't know and want to know, you should check out the other videos we have on the channel about it. And with that, they make up their mind and get ready for a battle. Moving down to the actual port, we see a line of civilians getting loaded up into the cargo ships. But it seems not all of them are just submissive and compliant, as one pretty tough guy spits on one of the vampire soldiers, which of course, and obviously angering the vampire, he then lunges to try and take a bite out of him. But before he can do anything, an arrow rips through the air straight into his head, killing him on the spot, as the Wolverine and Night Guard jump in to defend these people. And again, Wolverine starts doing what Wolverine does best, being an unstoppable murder machine, as he starts cleaving vampires down one by one. But of course, there's still the main issue of getting all these innocent people out of here before they get hurt as well. So Wolverine then turns to the tough guy, whose name funnily enough is Big Dan, telling Big Dan to get these people out of here while Wolverine and his partner finish cleaning up these vampires. And cleaning up is an understatement, as this is more of a massacre, with none of these vampires even standing a chance, as some get decapitated, gutted, and even stabbed through the heart. And while Logan continues fighting mindlessly, he then starts to think to himself in his head, this whole thing really does stink. And no, not just because the entire world smells like vampire stench, but everything is just bothering him more than he wants to admit. Because even if this isn't Maverick's standard motivation, good soldiers adjust their tactics to match the mission at all times. And even with Blade, even though Wolverine thinks something might be up, he still isn't the first good guy to go bad. And so Wolverine is basically sick of all of these unanswered questions and half-truths and just wants some answers. As they finally cleaning up the rest of these vampire scum, with Logan bleeding heavily and with a knife in his back, which all of these injuries would most likely be death for any lesser creature, but not the Wolverine in his amazing healing factor, as he simply takes the knife out of his back and hops on the nearest boat, ready to sail off to Santa Cruz, the location of where Maverick might be. But before they head off, they decide to destroy anything Maverick and his vampire crew could use, as they blow up the giant cargo ship that they were using for human transports, and set sail on their way. And after a while, they eventually do make it to the Santa Cruz island, without much trouble on the way, but that could change very soon. As they even point out saying, well, this seems relatively too safe compared to everything they have experienced earlier. And as they finally find the cave entrance getting ready to go in, suddenly Nightguard senses there is something in the water, and something that is rapidly moving towards them. Well, not something, some things, as she sees multiple targets in the water swimming towards them at rapid speed. Vampires. And no, not just normal human vampires, some sort of either Atlantean or sea creatures turned into vampires, meaning they are in for another giant fight before they have even gotten into Maverick's secret underground base, in which we see a giant battle ensue. And while individually these creatures don't stand much of a threat, they are pretty powerful in numbers, as soon as they get cut down and killed, two more show up in its place. But of course, these two hunters are pretty good at what they do, and they are pretty easily cleaning up the battlefield. Logan using his iconic adamantium claws, and Nightguard using her specific vampire hunting sword and crossbow. And while they are fighting, Logan takes a second to monitor and appreciate Nightguard's fighting style and ferocity. But a second is all it took, as he is caught off guard by one of the sea vampire creatures as it pins Logan to the ground, getting ready to bite into him. But before he is able to do anything else, Logan then picks up a flare from the side, shooting it into the creature's face, not only blowing its head open, but lighting it on fire. But we also see the little fire from it ignite the engine, and with that, Logan tells Nightguard to put up her helmet, as the entire ship literally explodes with them jumping out into the water. Which, I mean, if they were being swarmed while on a boat, being in the natural habitat of these sea creatures, the water, puts them at a pretty big disadvantage, as we see them dive into the water, side by side, back to back, getting ready to continue fighting. And I am not too sure if it's even consistent or not, but realistically, Wolverine shouldn't even be able to float in water. With that heavy adamantium skeleton weighing a ton, as soon as he touches any water, he should float to the bottom. But of course, that wouldn't make for an interesting story if Logan just sank to the bottom and couldn't move. Anyways, as the fight goes on, it seems like the water disadvantage isn't that big of a disadvantage itself, as they continue cleaving and slicing up vampires like it was nothing. But as Wolverine and Nightguard are cutting and slicing, blood gets drawn everywhere. And what does blood do in the ocean? It draws other predators. As even Logan realizing this, he grabs Nightguard and tries to swim away before an entire squad of sharks pull up, joining their battle and eating at whatever they can. But Wolverine is able to pull her away as they clear the battlefield and swim somewhere else. We then move over and see them re-emerge in some kind of cave. That's right, they seem to have found their way into Maverick's secret hideout. And as they make it out of the water and onto land, we see they are being watched by none other than Maverick and his new duo, Alyssa, both whom are vampires and seeking Logan to either willingly or forcefully turn him into a vampire for their cause. And as Logan goes to obliterate the camera, he then turns to Nightguard, his duo, because he has just come up with a theory. As you see during this entire story, Maverick has not once even acknowledged Nightguard in her presence. So either he is incompetent in willingly ignoring her, or he doesn't know she is there. As you see, it turns out vampires don't show up on cameras for whatever reason. And seeing how Maverick's only visual contact with Wolverine so far has been drones, cameras, and other technology, she is basically a wild card up Logan's sleeve, a strategic advantage. But as it turns out, this so-called advantage doesn't stay secret for much longer, as while they are talking about Logan's theory, they are ambushed, yes, as you might guess, by more vampires. But not just any vampires, it seems like highly trained ninja vampires. And with that, once more, Logan and Nightguard gear up to slay more vampires. And just like before, they start cutting them down one by one. And you might be saying to yourself, wow, this is getting repetitive, them just fighting hordes of vampires. And yeah, even Logan seems to think so himself. As he goes on to say, this is getting old. Fighting these bloodsuckers on their terms, always outnumbered. From the security guards in the casino, to the mercenaries on the freeway, and even to the aquatic creatures in the water. And because of this, and being so close to Maverick and stopping this entire ordeal, Logan gets sick of fighting, and instead decides to run away and focus on the real target. As he has Nightguard use her weapon to shoot open the door, as they run down and escape from that one horde of vampires. Or at least that's what it looks to the ninja vampires. But it seems Logan was actually retreating to find another strategic advantage. As because in his own words, when you want to reverse the odds when facing superior numbers on a battlefield, you cut down your enemy's ability to maneuver, as we see them on a straight catwalk with nowhere to really run around and only facing each other head on, and going face to face with a mutant who can heal from almost any injury with indestructible claws that can cut through almost anything isn't really a smart idea. As Logan rushes up, engaging in close quarter combat, literally brutalizing every enemy he and Night Guard faces. And eventually, and not surprisingly, they are successful, defeating and maiming every enemy vampire on the field. But it seems like Wolverine isn't done yet with his plan and other surprises, as he then goes to pick up one of the vampire's sword. And what does he do with it? Well, he literally stabs himself through the stomach, screaming out in pain as blood splatters everywhere. And why did he do this? Because this was the end game and the goal of his plan all along. As you see, having a sword stuck in his stomach, it slows his healing factor down, because his healing factor is going to go into overdrive trying to heal a wound that is constantly being reopened from the sword stuck in there. And he is slowing his healing factor down, so he is vulnerable to vampire enzymes, as he turns to Night Guard, telling her to turn him. And with her trusting Logan, she does, biting him in the neck and giving him this now curse or mark of the vampire, turning him into the very enemy he was fighting against. And just as he is turned, we then move back to Maverick's POV, where we see on his cameras Logan disappeared, because as a vampire now he doesn't show up on recordings, giving him just another advantage. Because as you know, Logan may not be Iron Man type of smart, but he is combat smart, and strategically very sound. But with this new information on the field, Maverick himself then gears up to go out there to confront Logan himself. Moving back over to Wolverine, here is where things get really interesting. As you see, not only is he a powerful mutant in his own right, but now he is a powerful vampire too. And when you combine those things, you get something entirely new. As even Logan goes on to say that he can really get used to this new level of power. Invisible to security, built-in night vision, speed and power for days. Everything about him is dialed up to, well, dial 11. But before he can test out his new abilities even further, he is shot in the arm. Shot in the arm by Maverick, who is now joining the fray, as he continues to shoot Logan. And this is only a problem now because his healing factor is slowed down due to the vampire's mark. So I guess being a vampire does have some of his drawbacks. Yeah, this isn't going to kill him, but he's not going to heal as fast as he would be, as we see him crawling away as Maverick trails behind him. With Maverick going out to pull out a rifle and weapon that looks like it's straight out of Halo, he even goes on to explain to Logan that he doesn't know how he was turned. He figured his body wouldn't even allow him to be a vampire, but he can still turn his situation around if Logan decides to play nice. And with that, Maverick calls out Alyssa, his partner in crime. But it seems all these vampires aren't on the same page, as Alyssa, being a self-proclaimed queen of vampires, has ulterior motives. Because as she steps out of the shadows, she then greets Logan, telling him that she is just a future queen, seeking out her future king, as she goes to tap Logan on the chin, seemingly putting him under her spell. Because as it turns out, some vampires are able to control the will, basically mind controlling other lesser vampires. We see Blade, over in the main Bloodhunt series, do the same type of thing to Black Panther. But with Logan out under her spell, she has seemingly betrayed Maverick to get her hands on Wolverine, a now almost indestructible vampire being. We immediately pick up in the thick of it with a little vampire on vampire action, with Wolverine jumping straight into someone ready to cleave them up, and that someone being none other than Maverick, an old Weapon X buddy of his. And why? Well, we move back a couple minutes beforehand and see what happened. We see Wolverine, Maverick, and another vampire woman named Alyssa. As you see, this woman Alyssa here is a vampire, but not just any vampire, she seems to be on some kind of higher echelon than the other two, as she is able to basically mind control Logan, whispering sweet nothings into his ear, getting him to do her bidding. As you see, she is a self-proclaimed queen, looking for a self-proclaimed king. And because of this, she tells Wolverine to fight Maverick to the death. The last man standing wins, which led us to the point where we seen Logan lunging for Maverick. But moving over where we pick up with Night Guard, Wolverine's new vampire hunting duo, who ironically enough is a vampire herself, we see her running through the cave system. Trying to find something specific that Logan instructed her to find. Killing a couple vampire guards on the way, she blows down the door and finds a central computer hub for this entire vampire compound. And just as she's about to take aim and destroy everything, she is shot and attacked from behind, as more reinforcements of vampire guards came in, ready to finish her off. But of course, being a seasoned vampire hunter herself, she isn't going to go down without a fight. And speaking of a fight, we move over and see the one between Wolverine and Maverick, where we see these two vampires coming head to head, but with Logan obviously having a clear advantage, with not only having an incredible healing factor, but indestructible claws that can cut through almost anything. If this fight goes on too long, Wolverine becomes the absolute favorite during the skirmish. But just then the fighting stops, as Maverick grips his head, because something is off, something is confusing him, as just suddenly his head feels weird. It feels empty and alone. Well, it is simply because Alyssa is no longer using her kind of hypnosis ability to control Maverick. and instead is controlling Wolverine, as she sees as a superior being and combatant, wanting to make him her new king instead. As he repops his claws, getting ready to come in and immediately slashing his gun, as Wolverine is still ready to engage in a battle and put him down for good. But Maverick, now having a clear head, realizing that not only is this all wrong, but he's been used and tricked by Alyssa, as this was her plan all along. Wear Logan down by sending hordes of different types of enemies to fight him day in day out, and then eventually get close enough where she can control him and have a unstoppable one-man army as her future vampire king. But with Logan not only being in a frenzy right now, and being controlled, the last thing on his mind right now is to hear Maverick out and stop fighting. No, he wants the violence and bloodshed, as he rushes in and continues fighting, but not immediately going for the kill anymore as he put his claws up. Instead, he engages in a fist fight with Maverick, and with them both being vampires now, they have a certain level of enhanced durability and strength. But even with Maverick's vampire's abilities, it means absolutely squat to Logan, as instead of backing down or resigning from the pain, no, he relishes in it, licking his lips of the blood with a smile on his face. And if you're in a battle and you see anybody do this, the last thing you want to do is continue fighting them. But he then lunges for Maverick once more, pinning him to the ground, as he continues to not only taunt Maverick, but slashing him more across the chest, drawing blood. But Wolverine stops for a second, and a second is all Maverick needed for him to speak some words out, telling Logan, yeah, I got fooled by her, by Alyssa, just like she is fooling you now. And these words seem to do something to him. For a split second, it clears his mind. It makes him think rationally, as he thinks to himself, what am I doing? Mav's a friend, sort of, and Alyssa, but before he's able to think anymore and get loose from the mind control, Alyssa the vampire comes right up, whispering more in sweet nothings into his ear, furthering her hold on him. As you see, this kind of mind control isn't just, once I put you under, you're there for good. No, he could be influenced out of it, so he needs constant reassurance from Alyssa herself, which is a good thing for Logan, meaning he isn't fully gone. But for right now, he is back under her control, and he gets ready to finally finish the job. As he goes on to pop his claws and tell Maverick, Alyssa here, she is a queen, royalty, and she wants a king, and she deserves the best there is. But before Logan can connect his downward strike, suddenly there is an alarm blaring off in the cave, saying that the command center has been breached. Of course, that is the actions of Nightguard, and because of this, Alyssa and Wolverine get distracted, looking up to see what the sirens were about. And in the heat of the moment, as Logan looks back down to finish the job, he sees his prey, Maverick, is gone. But Alyssa is calling him forward, so he has no choice but to follow. As we cut over and see what Nightguard was doing as she finishes up the rest of the vampire guards. But her troubles aren't over yet, as Wolverine and Alyssa arrive trying to kill her now, as Wolverine immediately lunges for her. But Nightguard, not only being a skilled combatant, but a vampire, meaning enhanced reflexes herself, is able to dodge out of the way in time, which even Alyssa says excellent reflexes. I'm impressed. Not many are able to avoid such an attack from our hairy mutant friend. As Alyssa goes to compliment Nightguard, thinking in her head that the battle is already won and Wolverine is going to make short, quick work of her. But here's where we see something pretty interesting. As you see, Louise turns around and towards Logan with her hand up, and I'm not sure if this is just a gesture of telling him to pause and stop, or if she's doing some kind of technique or an attack, but we do see Logan stop his attack and listen, as she goes on to say, Logan, I know your mind is not your own, just as I know who and what you are, Alyssa, and as I know what I must do. As it seems just as hearing her voice, Logan temporarily snaps out of Alyssa's mind control, but just as he does, Nightguard tells Logan that she is sorry, but this will hurt, as she plunges her sword and weapon straight into Logan's stomach, as he obviously screams out in pain. But Nightguard then goes to whisper in Logan's ear, telling him to break her spell, heal yourself and return to me. And Alyssa, watching as her prized possession, Wolverine, is being defiled and turned back against her wishes, she gets angry. And no, not just a normal type of angry, but you literally see her face, her very form start to change and morph into something more beast-like, something more vampire-like, as she goes from what she was, a decently looking woman, to a ghoulish beast, lunging straight for Nightguard, telling her that she is going to rip her heart out. And while those two women are fighting in the background, we then cut over and see what's going through Logan's mind, as he is in pain, bleeding, trying to think, trying to concentrate, because the weapon that Nightguard stabbed Logan with was a UV lace sword, which is currently turning his guts into mincemeat, killing him, and he has to get it out of him before it's too late, because not only is he a experienced mutant with abilities, but he is a vampire for better or for worse, as he shares their weaknesses too, including sunlight and UV laced objects. But of course, being Wolverine, he is able to push through and get it out of his system, as he kneels on the ground, clutching himself, finally being able to think freely for once, as Alyssa is out of his head and not mind controlling him anymore. Also, the fact that his hit healing factor is kicking in and destroying the vampire enzymes from his body, because a big enough wound, the UV blade in his stomach, caused his healing factor to work overtime, finally expending this vampire curse from his veins. But it seems he is not healing as fast as he wants to, as while he is on the ground getting his bearings, Alyssa and Nightguard continue their battle, with Nightguard pinned against the wall. Alyssa then tries to use her tricks on her now, telling her that we need not to be foes. You are welcomed inside of my vampire army, you only need to look into my eyes. But as it turns out, her hypnotic tricks are useless against Nightguard, as she has had experience and trained against this. And using this moment of weakness against Alyssa, she ditches all of her fancy gear and pulls out one of the oldest vampire killing tricks in the book, a wooden stake to the heart, as Nightguard is able to finally stab Alyssa, putting an end to her reign as a supposed vampire queen, as she literally crumbles, turning to ash and dust, while Wolverine, finally up and healed, not a vampire anymore, watches as her body crumbles. But just when they think it is over, they hear another voice behind them, and it is none other than Maverick, finally slipping back after the real battle had finished. And Wolverine, not one to easily forget, immediately lunges for him, pinning him against the wall with his claws out, ready to slice at his neck at any given moment. And now with both of them free and clear of mind, Logan finally asks the big questions here. All of those soldiers, the mercenaries, you threw them all into the meat grinder against Logan being killed and slaughtered, and for what? What did he gain for all of this? Maverick simply answers, for love. Which I mean, for as excuses go, it's pretty underwhelming, but he further goes on to explain what happened. How Alyssa originally came to him with a job offered, but turned him into a vampire instead. Then she started to fill his head with all kinds of lies. Lies about how she loved him, and how they were going to rule this new vampire world together. And worst of all, he liked it. He didn't even try to fight back. And with Logan still getting ready to finish the job and kill Maverick once and for all, he even has a little bit of internal dialogue, as the comic goes on to say and talk about Logan, how there's a monster that lives inside of him, but also a bleeding heart of compassion too. A voice, constantly fighting for his attention, and this time the voice of reason and compassion takes the form of Nightguard, Louise, as she tells Logan to release Maverick, how not only is Alyssa dead, but the blood curse is broken. He isn't a vampire anymore, but just a normal human. And this time, it seems the voice wins, as Logan agrees and puts away his claws, letting Maverick live. Immediately moving over though, we see the duo outside of the cave, getting ready for evacuation and to leave this island. And while he was on the radio talking to his little CIA friend, his friend tells Logan that things got pretty rough out there, but it's looking like your super pals, the Avengers and other superheroes, finally might be turning the tide in the battle. And if you want to know how that went in the main Bloodhunt series, with the Avengers fighting off against Blade and his super vampire team, you can watch the entire series. I'll leave a link down in the description and in the comments. But as he gets off of the phone, he then turns to Nightguard, telling her that now he doesn't have any problem with Maverick or about how he got dragged into any of this blood-sucking mess. But it's just what he said about liking having Alyssa in his head, telling him all of those pretty little lies. How he knew exactly what he meant and took pity on him and related to him because Logan went through the same thing. How deep down he knew it was all wrong, but his more animalistic side, it liked it and went along with it, maybe even hinting at Logan's inner battle about how he isn't the hero that everyone thinks he is. But of course, Nightguard goes to reassure him, telling him that it's just a seductive pull of vampirism, and how it is dark and unrelenting, and never silent. And that is why she must return to her home place now, because the longer she stays in this world, the more difficult it is for her to resist her own vampiric urges. And as I share a little laugh, Nightguard then turns to Logan, telling him that before they part, one last long kiss, as we see them kiss on the beach shore before they have to be separated, seemingly permanently. But of course, with most things in comics, if it's popular enough, you know it's going to be coming back. But for now though, that is the end of this issue and series of Wolverine Bloodhunt. If you enjoyed this series, leave a like and leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Or even if you enjoy this type of content, subscribe to the channel and put notifications on. As always, this is the Hero Informer, and thank you for watching.